I'm Casey with Spire Network, and I want to invite your staff and team to join us as we're out on tour. We'll be at 12 different Topgolf locations from St. Louis to Portland, to Dallas to Tampa, to Baltimore, and many more from October 2022 to March 2023. We want to host you and your team for a fun day of building community with other Spire leaders in your area, and have you hear from a top business professional and ministry leaders too. A buffet lunch and some Topgolf swag is included, so register your team today at spire.network/Topgolf, and we'll see you soon. Well, welcome back to Spirecast Backstage, everyone. This is day one of our Spire conference, and you know what? The storm is getting worse and worse around here, so it's actually going to be the only day of our conference, and Pastor Gene Appel, he was scheduled to close our conference tomorrow, so since we're not getting a chance to hear from him on the big stage, we would love to just hear what you had planned to deliver to leaders this week.
Thanks, Casey. Good to see you.
You too.
We serve at churches 30 minutes down the road from each other.
That's
in California. Here we have to come to Florida to bump into each other.
That's how it goes.
It's good to see you. But so I grew up, a lot of kids grow up when they're kids playing house, playing doctor, playing Star Wars, whatever it is. I'm a pastor's kid, and this might sound weird, but we grew up at our house playing church.
Okay.
And I've got 3 older sisters, and they do a worship team. One of our brothers would pray, and I'd give a sermon. We'd hit mom or dad 4 or 5 times with the offering bucket before they realized what was happening. It was a very profitable experience.
Yes.
And, a lot of years have gone by since those days as a kid playing church. And, after being in ministry 40 years now, over 40 years, I've just realized it's possible to play church as an adult too.
Oh, that's good. Yep.
And sometimes we're just so busy going through the motions of what a church does. We forget what a church is and what we're called to be. Right. And recently I was going into an international house of pancakes. And, when you go into an IHOP, you expect you're going to eat pancakes. Right. And so it was just interesting to me. I go into IHOP expecting to eat pancakes, and the special of the day was not chocolate chip pancakes. The special of the day was not Swedish pancakes. The special of the day was not banana walnut pancakes. The special of the day was hot chicken enchilada plate. And the thought hit me, I'm like, does the International House of Pancakes forget why they exist? They're about pancakes.
Right.
They're not about enchiladas. And I was just thinking about how many of us as churches, we start playing church and we forget why we exist, and we forget that Jesus' primary mission was he came to seek and save the lost.
Right.
And so sometimes, I need to remind myself, and I think this is probably true for every church leader, of what does a faithful church look like? And one of the passages that I come back to again and again in my life is from Colossians chapter 1, where Paul is writing to the church in Colossae. And interestingly, this isn't a church that Paul had ever visited. It's not a church that he had founded. He'd not ever been to it before. But based on what others were saying, he writes about it as being a faithful church. And so he says, I write to you, brothers and sisters in Colossae, to the faithful brothers and sisters. And so it raises in my mind, what was it? Why would he call this church faithful? And so one of the first thoughts that I wanted to share in my message this week was that faithful, dynamic, supernaturally empowered churches are full of people who possess a passionate faith. And Paul even talks about that. I got it here in verses 3 and 4 of Colossians 1. He says, we always thank God, the Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, when we pray for you, because we have heard of your faith. And I was thinking about how many times, when we talk about churches or things, it's like, do we say, oh yeah, they have so much faith in that church. Right. And, having been in ministry for years, it's like there's 3 different kinds of people in every church is how I break it down. One is what I call the drive-through people. And they look at church as kind of McChurch. And it's kind of like, welcome to Community Christian Church. Can I take your order, please? And
Right.
yeah, I'd like a great service today and wonderful child care and an inspiring message. Would you like cheese on that?
Right. Everything is tailored
Yeah,
to us
to them.
these
And
days.
so there's no connection, there's no
Right.
community, there's no life change.
Right.
You know, another kind of person I think in every church are what I call the flu shot people.
Okay.
And I mean, we know a lot about vaccines right now, right? So you know, when you get a vaccine, you're actually getting a small part of the virus to help you build the antibodies, so you don't
Right.
get the full disease. And it seems like in a lot of churches there are people who are what I call the vaccine people or the flu shot people, who they want just enough of God that, you know, it's like, okay, I've got my
Right.
fire insurance when I die, but
Right.
I've got just enough that it prevents me from getting the full disease of following
Right.
Jesus. And you know, I show up a couple times a month, throw a couple bucks in the offering containers, shake a couple of hands, but there's no real life change. But the third kind of person in every church that I think of, I refer to as the committed core. And these are the people with that passionate faith. You know, in the last 2.5 years, which have been challenging for all of us, you know, we've all seen people depart from our churches, heartbreaking losses in our churches. And, you know, we have a saying among our tribe of churches. We like to say, in essentials, unity, in opinions, liberty, and then in all things, love. And as I've looked at churches that have had some heartbreaking departures over the last 2.5 years, it almost seems to me like never is it over the essentials.
Right.
It's always over matters of opinion. You know,
Definitely.
they didn't leave over your position on the doctrine of the resurrection. They left on your position over mask. They
Right.
didn't leave on, you know, the doctrine of amazing grace. They left over when was the right time to reopen or not
Right.
reopen. And yet, you know, every church leader, I think, looks around right now and says, who's left? Who's stuck it out? Who's still here? And what I would just say to you, that's your committed core.
Yeah.
These are the people that you couldn't get by without. They, you know, they roll up their sleeves, they serve, they give, they open their Bibles and say, Word of God, speak. And if I was a church leader right now and looking into the future, I would just say, look at those people who are with you and look them in the eye and say, thank you for possessing a passionate faith, for not being drive-through people looking for McChurch, for not being, you know, vaccine people looking for just enough of God that it keeps you from getting the full disease, but to be a part of the committed core, because this church and its future couldn't exist without you. And thank God for people who possess a passionate faith.
Yes. Amen. Well, you know, Ashley kicked us off today, Ashley Wooldridge, talking about, you know, faith and also faith over fear. Talking also about reaching out to the one, you know, going after the one, the person who's lost. And yeah, we have that committed core. How do you keep the committed core, though, on fire for reaching the one?
Well, you got to keep casting that vision. You know, as you go on in this Colossians chapter 1, Paul talks about, he says, we have heard of the love you have for all the saints.
Yeah.
And when he says all the saints, you know, I picture this church with outstretched arms, and it doesn't matter if you're young or old or black or white or Asian or Latino or, you know, blue collar or white collar or healthy or whole or broken, but it's just for all the people. And I think sometimes we forget, you know, the gospel is for all the people. And, you know, you look at the ministry of Jesus, and he always went looking for those people who were on the margins, who were forgotten. And you know, the religious elite of the day were kind of like, ooh, you're hanging out with them? Ooh, you're going to love that person? Ooh, they're nasty. Ooh, they're whatever. And you didn't know how they talked in the Bible, did you? That's how they talked. Ooh.
Chances are, yeah. Same as us.
I think about, you know, the woman when he was at a Pharisee's house one day for a meal, and this woman who was a sinner in the town, maybe that was a nice biblical way of saying a prostitute, we don't know for sure, burst in with her alabaster jar, and she's weeping at Jesus' feet. She's wiping his dirty feet with her hair, and, you know, the Pharisees who's hosting this is very offended by all of this, and but it's just so clear, she didn't care what everybody else thinks. Nothing breaks through pretense like desperation.
Right.
And I think Jesus' heart was just saying that day, she's welcome here. So many times in our churches, I think, people look, ooh, you got tattoos. Ooh, you smell like alcohol. Ooh, you smell like tobacco. Ooh, you smell like wacky tobacco, whatever it is. And I think Jesus, to that Pharisee that day and to us, would say, hey, you smell like pride.
Yeah.
And we've got to break that down and have an inclusive love for people who are far from God. And, in every community right now, I mean, here's what I know. There's people just struggling to hang on to their sobriety. There's people struggling to hang on to their marriage. There are people who are having a physical illness, and they're just tired. They're just worn down. There are widowed people, single people, divorced people who, come to church and see families loading up in their SUVs, and it hurts. And there are people with children that are breaking their hearts in these inflationary, recessionary times that we're in right now. There are people who are struggling to hang on to their business just one more month, to their car just one more month, to their house just one more month. And, Jesus really needs churches that are going to have an inclusive love for these people and say, it doesn't matter where you've been. The only thing that matters is the direction your feet are pointing today.
That's good. That's good. With leaders, now getting to hear from Ashley and getting to hear from you, what's something on your mind and your heart that you just want to speak to leaders of Spire, who are probably at this point back at their churches, leading a couple weeks out from, being here together and probably need that extra dose of encouragement once again. What would you want to say to them?
Well, being faithful in the local church is challenging.
Yeah.
And it cost us a lot. It cost us physically. It cost us emotionally. It cost us spiritually. It cost us financially. And there are times, and I'm sure I'm talking to somebody right now who just feels like throwing in the towel, just feels like giving up, just feels like bailing. And I don't want to sound overly spiritual on this, but again, back to this passage in Colossians chapter 1, Paul talks in there. He says, it was like, where does this love and this hope come from in the Colossians? He says, it springs from the hope they have stored up for you in heaven. Now think about that. The hope you have stored up for you in heaven. And he talks about this blessed hope of heaven, and we probably don't talk about that enough. And my mom died last year. My mama was a beautiful woman. She was 98 years old and had a long life. And even though at that age, you know that time on earth is short, I miss her a lot. And she was just my biggest cheerleader and biggest prayer support and encourager, in ways that nobody will ever know. Even a few weeks before she died, she would still be watching my messages online back in Illinois where she was. And I'd talk to her every week. And almost every week she'd say, oh, honey, that message you gave last weekend, that was the best. I know I said this the week before, but that was the best sermon you've ever preached. And, I really needed that message on sexual temptation, which was kind of creepy.
Wait a minute.
But, I just really miss my mom.
Yeah.
And I miss my dad died when I was 14 years old. I have an older sister that died way too young, 20 years ago. And a few months ago, I was in church one Sunday, and we were in worship, and I was missing Mom, and I was thinking about my dad and my sister, and I was just thinking, I wonder what they're doing right now. And just as that thought hit my mind, we were singing the lyrics, praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, 3 in 1, praise forever to the King of Kings. And it hit me, what I'm doing right now is aligned with what they're doing in heaven. And it was comforting to me.
Right.
And because I missed them, my sister Gloria was a trained soprano. and I thought, it really is Gloria in the highest right now.
Yep.
She's hitting it. And but I just think as leaders who are tempted to give up and throw in the towel, we got to remember our blessed hope of heaven. And I think specifically, like those of you who've been in ministry, let's say 20 years or less, maybe it's been 15, 10, 5, maybe less than a year. And one of the things that's so heartbreaking for some of us is to see some of the mentors in our lives, people that we've looked to, who've influenced us, in some cases who we've served alongside, that didn't finish well.
Right.
And that didn't have a good ending to their ministry. And I think sometimes you wonder, is it possible? And, you know, even being at Spire Conference this week, one of the things I love about the diversity of age that's here is I look around, I see a lot of these young leaders in ministry, you know, a year, 5 years, 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
But then I also see a segment, they're the over 20-year crowd. Maybe they're 25, 30, 35, 40 years. And they just remind me, yeah, it is possible to stay faithful. And for every shooting star that falls, there's still a million stars shining in the sky, bright. And we're really blessed. And I just want to say to those of you who are staying faithful, you know, nobody knows the price that you pay to do it. And you know, and while there's a ministry to go, there's a marriage to build into, there's kids to raise, there's funds to raise, there's buildings to build, there's funerals to conduct, weddings to perform, a staff to lead, sermons to prepare, naughty folks to straighten out, children leading an insurrection in the nursery. But, you know, so many of you, you're still standing. By God's grace, you're still standing. None of us do it perfectly, but by God's grace, still standing. And I just thank you for not bailing, for not giving up, for staying in there, staying married. And you've reaped a harvest because you did not give up. And for everybody kind of in that 20-year category, you're surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. And I think back years ago, Stephen Curtis Chapman wrote a song that's always just fired me up. And he was talking about the first disciples, and he said, you know, nobody stood and applauded them. So they knew from the start this road would not lead to fame. All they really knew for sure was Jesus had called to them. He said, come follow me, and they came. Right. With reckless abandon they came. Yeah. And I just want to say to every church leader out there, let's be like that first 12 disciples and say, we will abandon it all for the sake of the call. No other reason at all but the sake of the call. Wholly devoted to live and to die for the sake of the call, because we're his church and we can be faithful till he comes.
That's good. I think I heard you say 40 years in ministry.
Yeah, 42 actually.
42 years of faithfulness in ministry. As you look back over 42 years, is there a theme or a nugget that you could say, do this or remember this, or maybe a couple things that got you through?
Yeah, it's a great question. And just as you were asking it, a couple things came to my mind. First is develop the practices early, the spiritual practices early that will help you withstand storms when they come. We're in Orlando during hurricane right now. A
literal storm. Yeah.
And you got to have the practices to protect you in storm times. And when I was young, I read Gordon MacDonald's book, Ordering Your Private World. And it was all about spiritual practices and disciplines. And those practices that I implemented from reading that book as probably a 25-year-old church leader have stood with me over the years to make that through. So that's indispensable. Yeah. And then the other thing that came to my mind is, don't do this journey alone.
Yeah.
And you don't have to do it alone. And that's one of the things I love about the Spire community, the Spire family, is like, we get to do this together. I mean, I've been looking around the conference this week. Most of my best friends in the world are here. Yeah. And these are the people that I turn to when I need a word. These are the people that kick me in the butt when I need it. These are the people that pray and love and encourage. But you have to be intentional to build those relationships. And, even coming to a week like this, I can always say, I'm too busy. I can't do that. There's 1,000 other things. but if you don't make those deposits in those relationships at times like this, then you're not going to receive the benefit
Right.
when you really need them. And I would just say, be intentional about building relationships with other people that can help do the journey together. We're not lone rangers. God never intended for us to do this alone.
Yeah. That's what I love most about what I've experienced at Spire. Also, I think people have asked, why do we need another conference? There are tons of conferences out there, lots of content you can take in from incredible leaders online anytime you want. The secret sauce here, though, is getting to sit with someone like you, and Ashley, and really everybody has access to you guys when we're here.
There's no green room here, and you're right. You can get good content anywhere, but you can't get relationship without investing in it.
Right. And so that's what makes Spire special. And thank you, Gene, for not only sitting down with us, but just your faithfulness over the last 42 years. I know as a church just down the freeway from you, we're always grateful for your faithfulness, always looking at you guys, seeing what you're doing. And you really inspire our church also to stay faithful.
It's mutual, you know that. And,
thank you.
Yeah, it's that iron sharpening iron.
Yes, you need it. Well, thanks, guys, for tuning in, and we've got plenty more coming your way, so stay tuned. Keep your eye on Spirecast.